Hi, my name is Yaneth Vasquez, and I wanted to focus my project proposal on Alzheimer's. Um, Alzheimer's is a commonly known brain disease that causes memory loss and destroys important mental functions of the brain in patients with Alzheimer's. So for my project proposal, I wanted to focus on the hereditary aspects of Alzheimer's and the neurological aspects. Um, so for the hereditary aspects, I've had a couple family members that have had Alzheimer's in the past, so I wanted to research what causes Alzheimer's to be passed on through the generations and why some days are a little bit more difficult for patients, and some days they're okay and they have more lucid days and they remember a little bit more. I also wanted to see what causes the aggression with Alzheimer's compared to like other neurological diseases like dementia. For neurological aspects of this disease, I wanted to focus on protein folding and if there are similar protein foldings in other neurological diseases. I also wanted to see if prions had a correlation to Alzheimer's at all and if they were prevalent in the same sort of diseases, along with seeing if Alzheimer's is more of an umbrella for other neurological diseases. So, kind of seeing if they have the same tendencies in patients, whereas like the diagnosis is similar, they have similar symptoms and they kind of act the same, along with if the patient reacts the same, like their brain functions and all of that different stuff. Um, I wanted to research Alzheimer's because a couple of my family members had it. My grandpa's had Alzheimer's for 7 years, along with my great grandparents on both sides having Alzheimer's. So it has occurred in my family quite a bit of times. So I was just interested in what that would look like, along with if that is something that would maybe show up again in our family, like if my mom were to have it because there's 3 generations of Alzheimer's on her side, um, and if that's something that my brothers and I would have to worry about. And with my grandpa having Alzheimer's for 7 years, I've kind of seen it firsthand, um, all of the symptoms that it's had on him, and he has forgotten how to do basic tasks, like taking a shower and cooking and just things like that. He has to have daily care from my grandma. Um, and with that, he also forgets who most of our family members are. So if they're not, um, like from his childhood, he doesn't quite remember. And it's kind of common for him to talk about his childhood a lot. And it like seems like he's back living in his childhood days. Um, Another thing that we've seen with him is that he gets lost and he just forgets where he's at. Uh, so sometimes at the grocery store, if he just like wanders away randomly, he just forgets where he's at. He forgets who he's with. So then it's kind of difficult to go out and live like a normal lifestyle for him. He's also just randomly walked out of his house a couple times. So he just forgets all of the basic things that you would need to like do in a day, I guess. But in researching, I found that there's different stages of Alzheimer's. So there's a early, middle, and late stage. In the early stage, this is kind of known as a mild stage of Alzheimer's. So functions, a person can function still independently, and they just have more of like a foggy memory type of situation going on. So they have a slight memory loss, but it's not super intensified yet. This is kind of more of a um, early onset, like they are not aware that they have it. And in this stage, you're able to live with Alzheimer's for up to 20 years without even knowing that you have it. It hasn't been really diagnosed in the early stages. It's not until the middle stage or the moderate stage where you are kind of diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And this is the longest stage of having Alzheimer's. And in this stage, it's damaging to the nerves and the brain. So that is when a lot of the memory loss starts to come in to play. And this is when aggression and frustration also begins. So a person that starts to forget things kind of gets a little more frustrated, and the aggression comes because they aren't thinking the same things that the people around them are kind of thinking and experiencing. And in this stage, they are also a lot more forgetful and a lot less compliant. So if you're telling them things like a simple task to do, like go maybe cook some food, they get really angry about it because they don't really know how to do things like that anymore, along with things like going to take a shower or like just going for a walk or taking out the trash. Uh, they just don't really have these experiences anymore, so they just get very frustrated super easily. And in the late stage, this is the shortest stage of Alzheimer's, and this is when changes in physical abilities start to happen, so they become a lot less communicative, and they just stop walking around and participating in daily activities. In this stage, they're also less aware of their surroundings and the environment around them. So they get very confused as to what they may be doing in a specific house that they're living in because that's not what they remembered from their childhood. Um, and they also have trouble communicating certain things, so it's common for them to not really talk as much as they would normally um, talk in earlier stages. So how Alzheimer's works in the brain. The disease causes the brain to shrink and it kills off the brain cells and neurons in the brain. So in this picture, you could kind of see that it deteriorates a lot of the gray and white matter of the brain, and it shrinks a significant amount. Neurons are also damaged and begin to affect the hippocampus, and the hippocampus is where all of the memory is stored. So this is what causes the memory loss in patients, and eventually the neurons being damaged affects the cerebral cortex, and this is what affects the daily functions and just all of their communications and activities that they participate in. So they stop um, knowing basic functions like cooking or taking a shower or doing things independently. Alzheimer's also often has damages to the whole brain, so this leads to a person not being able to live independently or function on their own. So this is where a lot of times they have to have a caregiver at all times, um, because they aren't able to do anything for themselves. They kind of forget how to do basic things and they're not able to just kind of live on their own. Um, and brain tissue also can show the chemical and molecular changes in autopsies. So they do have to do research on Alzheimer's, but they can't do it until the person has passed away and they do an autopsy on their brain to kind of see all of the different stuff chemically and molecularly that was going on. So this is where they find out all of the changes in the neurons and the cells that died in the brain. So there's a different causes to Alzheimer's, and there's the neuron tangles and the plaques that build up in the brain. For tangles, there's tau proteins that detach from each other and from the microtubules, and they connect to different proteins, so that causes the tangling of neurons in the brain. It disrupts communication between neurons and has effect on the memory. So it's a bunch of neurons that just kind of get jumbled together, and it doesn't allow signals to go through. And another cause is the plaques. There's beta amyloid proteins that aid in the breakdown of larger proteins. So once these build up, it kind of surrounds the nerves and it blocks all the signaling. So it doesn't uh, let any kind of basic functions be allowed in a person. And the plaques also trigger inflammation cells, and the inflammation cells kind of have to do with glial cells, and the microglial cells destroy the brain waste and toxins. So when it starts triggering the inflammation, all of the brain toxins are building up. So that's what also is causing the plaques to build up around the nerves, and it kills off the brain cells. Uh, so this is a picture of the normal brain and what an Alzheimer's disease can do to it. Um, there's approximately 5.8 million people that are living with Alzheimer's that are above the age of 65. So part of what I wanted to research um, is the effect that it has with other neurological diseases. So 60 to 70% of people with dementia also have Alzheimer's. So it is kind of the umbrella effect with that case where most cases of dementia also have Alzheimer's and they start forgetting things and they're not able to do basic functions anymore or live independently anymore. And they become a lot more dependent on other people in their lives. So I kind of want to see if there's any other neurological diseases that also correlate with Alzheimer's and if they have the similar tendencies in patients. And for treatments, there are no cures to Alzheimer's, but there are medical treatments, and a lot of it has to do with self-care as well. Um, so there are medications that are more cognitive enhancing medications, and this has to do with inhibiting the acetylcholinesterase. So the acetylcholine is broken down and stimulates receptors for memory and learning. So basically, the medication um, stimulates receptors that allow the memory and learning parts of the brain to kind of start working again and tries to kick them back into shape. For the self care, it's more of just being active and trying to get some daily exercise in and kind of just improving the style of life. So it's not super difficult to continue doing daily tasks and things like that. Um, but yeah, so basically, I still want to learn about the correlations of all of the different neurological diseases and if they are all linked back to Alzheimer's or if they have specific tendencies as Alzheimer's in the brain and the neuron deteriorations that go on and how the disease is passed on from generation to generation. But yeah, that's all that I have. Thank you so much for listening.